Hey everybody, welcome back to Miles and Mentors. We have with us Matt Dahl today, and we're going to learn about what brought him into the industry and tap into some of that lived and learned knowledge he's gained along the way so we can pass it on to you. So stick with us. We have a great episode lined up for you right after this on Miles and Mentors.
Welcome to Miles and Mentors, the podcast that humanizes trucking, getting real life advice and insights from logistics professionals from all over the industry. We sit down with those seasoned mentors who have put in the miles with a mission to pass on the knowledge gained from years in the industry to you. Now buckle up and enjoy the show.
Hey, what's going on, Matt? Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to talk with you.
Yeah, for sure. Now, your office looks a little different. Where are you at today?
Yeah, great question. I escaped the Minnesota winter. I'm in Columbia. We have about 12 to 13 reps here, and I'm out here visiting them for the next, it's been, 2.5, 3 weeks now, and I'll be out here till sometime in January. And yeah, having a lot of fun.
Poor guy, man, slumming it down there. We feel sorry for you. Just, man, so rough.
How is it in Kansas City now? Is it gotten a little colder, or how's the weather in December 10th there?
Yeah, it's not brutal just yet, but I'm struggling because it is getting cold. And Kansas City, I'm sure some will disagree with me, but I feel like we have maybe a handful of like good days here. Otherwise, it's just too cold, too hot, too muggy, whatever. Yeah. So yeah, it's trying to get used to that transition of seasons is a little rough.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm not missing the Midwest. So
I totally get that. No, man, I'm curious. I've been able to kind of keep up with what you're doing, your guys' podcasts and everything. But what is it that brought you to the industry in the very first place?
Yeah, great question. So I was in sales since I 19, about 2013 was my first role in sales. I had a brief touch with the transportation industry in 2015. I was a dispatcher for a trucking company, or not trucking, bus company. To be very clear. But we had to, route the buses, and it was on demand and keep on time percentages. It was really exciting, really fun. I, enjoyed it, talking to the different drivers. And I kind of heard there that there was a thing called, trucking dispatch, but you needed experience. And I took a brief break from sales to try this, dispatching from the bus company. I really enjoyed it, but the issue was the pay was not very good. At the time I was 21, but I was like, I got to get back into sales. This is fun. But, and I stayed into sales. Then I had a point, when COVID happened, and, I had an apartment in Indiana. I had to move back. My job was going to go back to the office, and I wasn't really interested in, traveling all the way back. And I was like, I'd heard, I don't know where exactly I'd heard, if it was from Google or somewhere, but saw this freight broker thing. And I was like, well, this kind of combines my love for sales, but also the fun I had with the planning and the strategy, from my time as a dispatcher and router for, the bus company. So it's kind of just, perfect timing. And the last, 2.5 will be 3 years, next spring have, kind of gone by fast.
Fantastic. And, I know we'll dive into it a little bit deeper, but going from that side of things, dealing with the buses and then getting into what we know is logistics now, what would you say? Or is there any cross comparison there? How do those two industries mesh up?
I would say the particular bus company that I was working for, just because it was on demand for the city and you could be changing things, mid-transit and stuff, it was very chaotic, which is very similar to the brokerage. But I would say maybe not all bus companies would necessarily be that if it was like a fixed route, things like that. But the chaos was definitely, comparison. And obviously it depends on what type of freight you got. I had a lot of last minute spot freight as a broker, was heavy into seafood, and had some multi-pick, multi-drop, chaotic freight. So maybe it fit me well. I think I kind of got lucky. I mean, I really enjoyed being a cradle to grave broker, because I got to do the sales aspect, but also the operations aspect. It was so much fun from similarities from the bus company were fun. So I got to do everything from talk to the drivers to sell the customers to quote the freight. So I really got to see the whole industry, which was fun.
Now, I mean, there's a lot to that, especially coming into the industry and, diving straight in. To be able to sell it, to be able to do all that, you've got to have that knowledge to really, be able to talk that lingo and go with it. Is there anyone that you considered to be a mentor that really helped you out in that time to get your feet wet and get going?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a couple of people. One of the things I'm really glad I did early on, and I was really only doing it to go prospecting,
Yeah.
is to find papers on LinkedIn. I hadn't used LinkedIn since 2013. I think, I don't know, maybe I had one or two connections, hadn't been active, and I got tired of it telling me I had to log in. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go recreate this thing because it's not letting me, search. So I figured out my password, got back on there. I kept seeing some stuff, populate, and I connected with a couple people, John Rogers, for example, connected with numerous names, but he was one of the first ones I connected with. And there were some people that, definitely helped me early on. And, some I still consider friends. I shouldn't say some, most I still consider friends. Today, a lot of them I still talk to.
That's fantastic, man. And I am right there with you. I was asleep on LinkedIn for the longest time. Really didn't end up using it full time until we started the show. And diving in just in this short time, it's like I can totally see what I've been missing out on now, and kind of slap on the wrist for that. But it's funny, like I started a LinkedIn years and years ago. And then took so long that when I tried to reactivate, I had to like send in my driver's license and everything just to get back into it. But it's funny. I mean, it is such a powerful environment for business, and it kind of to me was like, why have I been wasting my time on various other social media platforms that aren't really helping me grow as much as the connections that I'm making on LinkedIn. So it's definitely
Yeah.
some hindsight.
Yeah, no, I think it's great for so many people in the industry. I know some drivers from LinkedIn, some owner operators have been coming over from X. I mean, from what formerly was Twitter, coming over to LinkedIn recently. It's cool to see more drivers coming over to LinkedIn too, because I feel like a lot of LinkedIn used to be mainly brokers, and a lot of the truck drivers are staying mainly on X. But I'm seeing more drivers come over to LinkedIn, which is pretty cool.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm gonna have to tap into X a bit more. We haven't really put too much into that space yet, so we'll have to see what we can do there. Now, obviously, this is a fast-paced industry, even though it moves slow at times. There's, like we've talked about, lots to learn, lots changing, especially with regulations and all that. Kind of thinking back from when you first got into now, what's something you wish you knew or understood better starting out that now?
Ooh, I got to be careful how I talk about this topic. But one thing this is what I really, and this is what my job is now. I'm recruiting sales talent, and this is like one of the most passionate topics probably for me. And I think this applies somewhat to truck drivers too, in a different way in terms of picking their company. I know that's kind of who our target audience is, but the non-compete aspects are very, very big in this logistics industry. Before signing anything, I was just talking to someone the other day who's going through a lawsuit. I mean, this industry is pretty cutthroat in that regard. So I would always tell, whether it be a driver, a W-2 rep, a tech provider, you could have a great opportunity on paper, but read the fine print and fully understand what you're signing and what you're getting yourself into long term, because what you sign can have consequences down the line.
100%. Great insight. Now, from what you do today, I'd like to kind of talk through, because I mean, you've held these positions in sales, recruiting. Now you're co-host of an amazing podcast. How do these different facets of your career touch back and connect to kind of that driver's journey, especially for those looking to become like an owner operator, grow a fleet? Like, how does what you do in your day job connect back to them in those roles?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one way I would connect. I mean, it's tough at first being an owner operator. I think it's the toughest job in the industry, especially because the first year, a lot of brokerages don't want to work with you for the 6 months. You're establishing credit, figuring everything else out. I think it's the same thing for a lot of things. I mean, I mainly started on LinkedIn just for fun. When I was a broker, I didn't really have any goals. I did not. If you told me I'd be, relying on it pretty heavily for recruiting what I do now, and have a podcast, I probably would have told you you're nuts, as I said earlier, of how I got on it. But I mean, sometimes I think it's kind of similarly, to owner operators starting out. I mean, you never know; they might 2 years later have a bunch of trucks. And at the beginning, it's not as much fun. I mean, I guess that hopefully that made some kind of sense, that correlation. But I would just say, it's always best to get started. You never know where the future is. You don't necessarily need a plan. I mean, not to say that planning is bad. I still do some planning, but sometimes it's okay just to go into things open-minded and see what happens and have fun with it. And sometimes the best things kind of happen from that.
Definitely. Now, we've hinted at your podcast a few times here, and for, everyone should know about it. But for those that don't, could you give us a little understanding of what that podcast is and what it's all about?
Yeah. So 2 Dogs, 1 Pod is our podcast. Shout out to we're actually pretty Kansas City heavy on our sponsors. Shout out to our sponsors, Taft's, Multi-Service Fuel Card, HD Ships, Black Box Logistics, Load Base, Sales Dash. But yeah, we've been going, I think we're at close to 40 episodes now. We just talked to different logistics professionals in the industry. We've had drivers on, trucking owners, shippers, brokerage owners. Just kind of just like this, just a casual conversation. And yeah, we've had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. You guys are doing some really amazing stuff on there. I find it interesting. I mean, you go back 10 years and it's like podcasting was this really, really niche thing that some people are into, but wasn't really mainstream by any means. And I think, especially in my view, since like COVID time, we've seen it really hit the commercial space and trucking in general. I mean, not even just podcasting, but the social media side of things, being able to, see different drivers, keeping up with the TikTok channels and whatnot is an interesting insight into the industry that I don't think, the rest of the world really got tapped into before. What are your feelings on how, podcasting and social media are influencing the industry and where that might go?
Ooh, it's a great question. I mean, you're seeing more and more pop up. I think you're seeing more and more companies have podcasts too, so they're seeing the value. You're seeing it all across the industry. I mean, I think it's especially as more technology comes in and AI comes into this industry. I think podcasts are a great way to keep it personalized and authentic. But I think it's growing. I mean, you're seeing more and more pop up, even more than a year ago, for example. So I think it's great for the industry, more content and more, ways to connect people. And yeah, a lot of fun conversations. I enjoyed listening to other logistics podcasts too. I don't have time to listen to them all, but I'd say at least once a week, I'm listening to an episode or 2 of another logistics podcast.
Definitely. I think it's one of those things, especially with the show where we're talking, a lot about, mentorship, the industry knowledge, these various different shows that are out there, these different platforms really offer such a wealth of knowledge that you can learn from, especially, for drivers wanting to, expand their career, sitting on the road, driving on the road, long hours. You got so much opportunity to tap into all that knowledge that's, being given, where otherwise, it'd be hard to gain all that. I mean, you're talking years of experience, but to be able to sit down with guys like you and so many other, professionals and kind of get those insights, I think there's so much value to be able to harness that in a platform like this where, others can go back and tap into that and really learn from it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because when I first started in logistics, that was one of the things I liked to do was go on other logistics podcasts. And I looked for the shipper episodes so I could hear what the shippers were having to say and what their perspective were on things. And I'd go through different podcasts and just search to find the shipper episodes.
Right.
So I think that's one thing we really try to do on our show too is, we had the director of distribution on at Hardee's, Carl's Jr. We've had a couple, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 different shippers on. And that's one thing I kind of enjoy doing because I think a lot of brokers, like hearing from that, similarly to how, drivers probably, enjoy, hearing people have, built up their own fleet starting from 1 truck, growing it to 10. So yeah, no, I definitely would agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. So much to be learned there. Now, obviously, with the industry, we've got our ups and downs and seasonal aspects as well. We've had kind of a rough year with rates and all. Now we're going into the holiday season. What is your take on the logistics industry now, and what do you see in our upcoming future? How do you see that adjusting out?
Well, I think everyone is guessing to some degree, but especially me. I mean, I'm not an expert by any means on any of that, but what I will say is I've talked to several of our agents, sales reps in the last week or two who seem to see capacity, getting a little more difficult, rates going up. read a couple articles from people, well-respected people who, think the same. So I'm optimistic for 2025. I don't know if it'll fully shift in Q1 or Q2, but I'm optimistic for a shift, which will be great. Because I think one thing that I always try to express to carriers too is, the rates are better for carriers. That means brokers generally do better too. 10% of or 15% or whatever you think the margin is of a $6,000 load is a lot more than 10-15% of a $4,000 load. So it's better for brokers too. And obviously I know a lot of owner operators are, struggling with these rates. So I'm hoping in 2025 is a switch.
Fantastic. Now, for those looking to get into what you do, your side of the industry, what are some insights for somebody to get involved in that side?
So it's interesting. So I'm glad you brought that up. So we have, for example, we have one trucking company owner he has a small fleet, 5 or 6 trucks. He still has his trucking company, but he's actually a broker with us as an agent too. He has, one direct customer, and he does both. We have a couple of trucking companies like that. Now, I think if you're an owner operator and you don't have the, a customer or two to start or some of the sales background, then it could be a little bit more difficult, and it might be a good idea to maybe get a W-2 job in the office. Don't sign a non-compete though, and then maybe to learn that way. But yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for small to mid-size fleets to get in on the agent side of the business, because they don't have to go sit into an office. They don't have to give up their trucking company. There's no KPI set hours. They still get the back end support of, insurance, TMS, load boards, carrier 411. We provide that all for free. And they get a generous split of the commission, but they don't have to leave their trucking company. So I've actually seen that. We have 3 now different trucking companies. And yeah, it makes sense for small to mid-size. Now, bigger trucking companies, they generally just get their own MC brokerage, and they have an asset. And ones, the owner operators can be a little smaller just because they don't have the customer base or the sales. But that mid-size, 5 to 50 truck range, I think there's some trucking companies where it can make a lot of sense to be an agent.
Fantastic. Now, I know within that, you mentioned several points of kind of technology within the industry. And I think that's a really interesting point to touch on, because technology, in just a general sense, has kind of exploded in recent years. But we're seeing that hit the logistics industry as well. So with your side of the industry, how has technology and the growth of that kind of impacted your day-to-day? And how do you see that, growing technology, especially with, AI and everything else coming into the scene? How do you see that impacting logistics overall in the next 10 years or so?
Yeah, I think I've had a little shift on that. I used to, first got in the industry, I was like, well, I'm just moving freight from point A to point B. I don't really need all this much technology. But it's been interesting on the recruiting side. The company I recruit for, HT Ships, we launched a proprietary TMS, proprietary tracking. We're very tech centric. That's been a real selling point, to have people sign with us as opposed to other companies. And some of the technology you see out there now is it's amazing. I was just watching something from yesterday, I believe, with an AI, carrier sales rep. Was really impressed. It was Happy Robot, I think is the name of the company. It was really impressive. But yeah, no, I think the human element will always be there. Relationships, trump everything. I know it's cliche, but I do think you're going to see more technology slowly, come in there more to help humans than replace them. But
right. Now, you mentioned there HD Ships is, tech centric versus other companies out there. How do you feel that kind of puts you guys ahead? And, how do companies kind of fall behind not embracing technology in that way?
Yeah, I think it can be a big advantage to embrace it, because technology is what you have to use every day. So if you're a broker and you're using outdated technology and you have to look at that every day and it's hard to navigate, brokerage is stressful enough. So I think it can be a real selling point to have that. Also can be a real selling point to shippers. Some of the big shippers, they're requiring certain types of technology, certain types of tracking, from that point of view as well. Yeah, I think it's a big advantage.
So, man, we've covered a lot here. What is some stuff that you feel would be beneficial for somebody starting out in the industry to kind of know? There's somebody that's wanting to go into this to expand and create a business and grow from there. Maybe become that owner operator. Maybe become a fleet owner. What's some good starting advice that you'd be able to give?
Yeah, I would just say be patient. I mean, you see so much on TikTok and even on LinkedIn, and you know, 3 million in the first 60 days, or you're going to make 15,000 a week as an owner operator starting off. It's hard work, and it's a grind. I mean, yeah, I mean that's the biggest thing I would say. Don't set too high of expectations at the beginning, and have fun with it. It's a fun industry, no matter what you're doing. So I would just say not to set too lofty of goals, but have fun with it. And yeah, those would be my main 2 points.
Fantastic. Now, to tap into your journey, what do you see the future for you holding? Like, what's your ambitions? I know they're treating you horrible right now. They're making you slum it down in the nice warm weather and all. But where do you see you going in the next 10, 15 years within the industry?
Well, I haven't been asked that before. That's a great question. I think I've shifted a little bit on that. So, kind of as I hinted at, getting into recruiting sales reps was not probably, on my map, 2 years ago.
Sure.
I had planned in getting back into brokerage as soon as I'm able to. But I really enjoyed the company I work for, the people, everything like that. I really think, we're on a trajectory for really big growth. So my original plan was, next summer when I'm able to be a broker, I'd immediately hop back in. But I don't think that's necessarily the plan right now. I'm really enjoying, we just hired 2 new recruiters on my team. We're growing, adding new agents every month. We have great ownership. I think more than likely the plan is, stay here for the next maybe 5-10 years. And eventually, I'm more of a small to mid-sized guy. So maybe when we, get to the, 800, 900 million, 700 million, some point like that in 5-7 years, then it might be time to, go do my own thing again. But I think, long term, I want to see us get to a great point.
I love that. Fantastic insight. Well, man, like I said, we've covered a lot, but anything that you feel that we've missed?
No. Yeah, I think we've covered most of it. I've really enjoyed, chatting with you, and looking forward to, watching the episode as well, checking out the episodes you had with Will. And yeah, again, shout out to all the good Kansas City companies and factoring, tech, trucking. Big fan of Kansas City.
Most definitely. Well, I want to give you a chance here for some shameless plugs. How do we find out more about you, get a hold of you, learn about your show, etc.?
Yeah, so you can I check LinkedIn messages more frequently than I check even my text messages. So if you want to get a hold of me, LinkedIn's generally the best way. Matt Dahl, HD Ships. Check out our podcast on Spotify or YouTube, 2 Dogs and 1 Pod. We also have a LinkedIn page, 2 Dogs and 1 Pod. But yeah, if you're looking to reach me directly, I would say LinkedIn. Send me a connection request, shoot me a message. It's probably the best way to reach me.
Fantastic. Well, man, thank you for everything you do for the industry, especially with the podcast and all, putting that information out there for everyone to learn from. Just means the world. And I think everyone's going to be able to continue to grow from that as years go on with all that you're putting out.
Yeah, well, appreciate you doing the podcast and having me on. And yeah, have a great rest of the day.
Fantastic. We'll see you soon. And for everyone watching, thanks so much and stay safe out there. Have a great day.